and we will start. After every 2 slides, I'll be looking at the question and answers, so we can handle the queries alongside understanding the concepts. Fine. All right. So the first thing that we need to know is what is communication, that we have already studied and that we have already discussed about in the very first lecture in the introductory session that we had. So I've already told you that communication basically is a process where the individuals try to share their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions with others, right? So all of us need people to share our thoughts with, right? We are, as we've already discussed in the past class, that man is a social animal and we cannot live without, communicating with others. Not only humans, other species on earth also communicate in their own way, in their own language. So business communication is a process of sharing information related to operations and functions of the organization, right? So here we have a definition on the first slide itself, that communication is a process of passing information and understanding from one person to another. So any kind of information, any kind of uh, uh, thoughts, any kind of feelings, any kind of emotions that one person wants to share with another person is done by the means of communication. Fine. And it is, if we talk about the communication in business context, it is about sharing ideas, information, and other important discussions that are held in the organization to the other person. Also, people at work face some challenges, certain issues, and they want to share it with their colleagues. So that communication that you do informally in your organization, that is also considered to be business communication. Fine. So according to the definition of Theo Heyman, communication is what? It is a process of passing information and understanding from one person to another person. And it is a process of imparting ideas and making oneself understood by the other person. Fine. So what are the objectives of this unit? By the end of this topic, you'll be able to identify the process of communication and identify the major challenges or barriers that are there in effective communication. To make the communication effective, what are the challenges, what are the barriers that are faced? That is also discussed in this unit itself. So another definition of communication says that it is the sum of all the things a person does when he wants to create understanding in the mind of other. So all the things that a person does, now that means he would rather speak, he would write, he would show it through his gestures or postures. He'll try to make the other person understand in some or the other way. And all those ways by which we are making our feelings, our information, our thought understandable by another person is considered to be as communication. Fine. Say, for example, you are with a friend, you see your friend coming from another side of the street and you want to tell him that you're standing there. What would you do? You'll wave, right? You'll wave from your end and you'll make your friend see and look at you. That is also communication. Or you will shout and call his name. That is also communication. So even if you don't speak, then also you're communicating by waving your hand to your friend so that he can see you and he can come to you, right? So communication includes everything that you do to make your thoughts, your feelings understandable to the other person. Now let us look at the nature of communication. The first thing is communication is a two-way process. Why we're calling it as a two-way process? Because once a person says something, we expect for a feedback from the other person. Say, for example, I teach you in the class and then I ask you to post your questions, right? So what I'm expecting that in case you have not understood, you would give me a feedback that, ma'am, I have not understood this point, or I want you to repeat this point so that I can understand what you've said, right? So it is a two-way process. When the speaker says something, the speaker wants that the receiver should give a feedback stating whether he or she has understood or not, right? So that is why we're calling it as a two-way process. Secondly, it is a dynamic process. I hope you understand the meaning of dynamic. Dynamic means which keeps on changing, which is always changing, which is not static. So communication is a dynamic process. Why? Because you take different means to explain same thing to different people, right? A person may understand one thing, by one way of communication, while the other person may not understand that way, right? So you keep on changing the way of explaining things to different people in different circumstances. That's why we say that communication is a dynamic process which keeps changing from person to person, situation to situation, place to place, medium to medium, right? Then it is pervasive. Pervasive means that a function that is seen at all the levels of management. Everywhere you would see communication taking place. So it is pervasive in nature. It requires at least two people. More than two can obviously be there. Like I am communicating with you. So there are more than two people, right? Me and you all who are listening to me. right? But at least two people are required for communicating. One single person cannot communicate to himself, and if he is doing so, that is not the right way of communication. That is just a way of practicing something or something like that, right? Then the next point says that it involves exchange of ideas and opinions. Whenever we talk about communication, we're talking about exchange of certain thoughts, exchange of certain ideas, exchange of certain opinions, right? So in communication, in case of communication, there's an exchange of ideas and opinions amongst people. Next point says that it is verbal and non-verbal. This also we have discussed in the previous class, that communication could be through words. Verbal means by the use of words. Those words could be spoken. Those words could be written. So communication can be either verbal, that is with the use of words, and it may also be non-verbal. That means we might not use words for communication. Just gestures and postures, hand movement, eye movement could be enough for communicating. And sometimes we use both of them. In certain cases, like when I teach, when I'm talking to you, I'm using my hands continuously to emphasize on what I'm saying. So communication can be either verbal, oral or written, or it may be only through gestures and postures. Like I said, you can wave to your friend if you want to tell him that I'm standing here, or you can wave and shout his name. So there you are using both the means of communication, verbal as well as non-verbal. Then it is goal-oriented. In case of business communication, it is specifically goal-oriented. And not only in case of business, when you communicate on your daily basis, there also you have certain objective for which you are talking. Either you want to satisfy your social need, or you want to share something which is, which is there in your mind. You want to talk to somebody to vent out your emotions. So there can be any reason for which you're communicating. So there is a reason, there's a purpose, there's an objective, or there's a goal due to which you are communicating with someone. And of course, it is interdisciplinary. If you want to communicate well, you need to have the understanding of the person. You need to have the understanding of the psychology of the person, the emotional background of that person, the educational background of the person. So discipline means subjects, right? So you need to have the knowledge of different subjects while you communicate. Now, that doesn't mean you need to have an MA in psychology or you need to have an MBA only. You can have good communication, but then you need to have good empathy. You need to be a good listener also. All these things are required if you want to become a good communicator. Fine. So let us look at the questions. If there is any question from your part, we'll quickly look at those and then we'll move to the further slides. Pervasive, as I've told you, pervasive means a kind of anything which exists at each level of management. So at the lower level of management also communication plays an important role. At the middle level of the management, communication plays an important role. And of course, at the top level also, management communication plays an important role in any organization. Fine, the workers also communicate, the managers also communicate, the employees also communicate. So communication is pervasive in nature. Then there's another question that goal-oriented means. Goal-oriented, as I've told you, there is certain objective for which we are communicating. There is certain objective behind which the communication. Say, for example, today I'm not feeling well. I might have faced certain problem at my workplace. I want to share it with my colleague. So the objective here is to share my emotions with my colleague. If the higher authority want to share certain new instructions to the employees that from tomorrow the timing at your workplace is going to change. You have to come from 8 o'clock rather than 9 o'clock. So there also the objective, the goal behind the communication is to inform the employees about the new policy change. So that is what is meant by it is goal oriented. That means whatever you communicate at workplace, there is certain reason behind it. There is certain objective behind it. Is it clear now? I hope it is clear. If not, you can again put it in the question and answer. I'll again explain it to you. Fine. So pervasive, I've already explained. I hope you have understood. It exists at every level of the organization. Every level of the organization, if something exists. So communication is done by the workers also, it is done by the employees also, it is done by the management also, it is done at the lower level also, it is done by at the middle level also. So therefore it is pervasive. Thinking out loud by talking to self is not communication. No, that is not communication. Communication requires at least two people. Okay, this is the basic characteristic of communication, that at least there should be two people involved. Then only the give and take can be done. All right, class has started. Rohit. Fine. Good evening to all of you. So let's move on to the next slides. Okay. Moving further. Let us understand the need of communication at workplace. What is the need of communication in the organization? First of all, exchange of information. As I told you, there is something that is happening in the organization which is new, which needs to be informed to the employees. As I have given you the example, say for example, there is a change in shift. The employee who is coming in the morning has to come in the afternoon from maybe from tomorrow. So he'll be given information about the same. So for informing the employees, communication is required. For issue of orders and instructions, there are certain orders that have to be given. Say, for example, the employees should take a small coffee break rather than taking a big break. 5 minutes break only is allowed, not half an hour break. So for that, issuing orders, instructions, education. Employees are trained, the employees are given training time to time. So to train the employees, communication is essential. Without communication, training is not possible. Education is not possible. Say, for example, I'm trying to give you some information. I'm trying to give you some knowledge. I'm trying to share some knowledge with you. So I'm educating you. And here also I'm communicating with you, right? Advising and counseling. any kind of advice you want to give your employee. If he or she's not working well, he's not performing well, you want to advise him to perform well. What is wrong with that employee? You have identified the problem, you want to give him advice, you want to give him counseling, then also communication is required. You want to persuade him. What is persuasion? Convincing him about something. You want to convince your employee regarding something. Say, for example, the compensation that you're providing, the salary you are providing, employee is not happy with that, but you want to convince him with the same salary. You are persuading him, right? You're convincing him. So for that, you need to communicate. You cannot sit back and think that the employee will agree to the compensation that we have already set for him. No, he would not. You'll have to persuade him. So for persuasion also, communication is required. If you want suggestions from employees, see, they are the people who are working on field, right? So if in case they are facing any challenges, they can give you suggestions. They can come up with suggestions to you and you can accept that. But for that, there needs to be communication between the manager and the employee. So for that also communication is required. For motivating your employee and vice versa. See, suggestions could be given from the management to the employees and from the employees to the management as well, right? Then if you want to motivate your employee to perform better, if you want to motivate them to, do their task in a better way, then also you can you have to use communication. You need to raise their morale, you want to boost them up, you need to communicate them. And in case you want to give them warnings, if they are not performing well, if they are indulged in any such activity which is not acceptable at your workplace, you want to warn them about that. For that also you need to communicate. So all these need for communication is in an organization. We're talking about the organization using these ways for communicating. Now comes the very important thing, which is the process of communication. And why do we call it a two-way process? This is the reason we call it a two-way process. Now you can see through the diagram that the communication process is a loop. Loop, you understand? The thing which comes back again from it starts from somewhere and it comes back to that same point. It is a loop, right? So the process of communication is a loop which starts with a sender. The person who wants to share something, the person who wants to communicate is the sender. The person who wants to share his ideas, views, emotions, thoughts, feelings, right? The person who wants to share the instructions, orders, that person is termed. But if I think that my